this is a name that has been thrown out by a lot of people within the Canadian Premier League ecosystem, from us as the media to the various teams, the players at times, and the supporters, obviously. But we don't often hear from managers about their thoughts on making the step from CPL to being the head coach on the staff, and what their ambitions are after their tenure in the CPL. Bobby Smyrniotis is one of those names that's floated out a lot, and he was asked about this very question after he beat Cavalry by 2-1. Let's hear what he had to say.
If you're asking me if I'd like to coach this great generation of players, of course. There's no doubt. I think any coach, and the same goes for players, you have to be ambitious in what you want to do. I can be very happy for the next 15 to 20 years at Forge if they keep me, but my ambition is always to move somewhere different as a Canadian and being part of the whole system and seeing the growth of this game. Of course, it would be the biggest honor to be able to work with the players that are in the national team, and in the future there will be players from this league that will be playing for the national team. So I think if, I don't know what Tommy would say or somebody else, I think we'd be crazy if we said otherwise.
I do love that Bobby, his thought goes, I don't know what Tommy would say or somebody else. He knows it would be one of the two of them with the level of success that they've had. But if they were to go on, Forge, Ollie, and get a fourth CPL playoff victory, I'm trying to get my brain to stop saying North Star Shield, North Star Cup now. If they were to do that, would it reinforce his potential candidacy for this job?
Yeah, I'm not sure he even needs that at this point. I think his resume in the Canadian Premier League speaks for itself. His resume developing, some of the key members of the national team speaks for itself. So this guy should get an interview. He should be part of the process and should be a leading candidate to be considered. Then you can make your decision. But I think it's pretty clear that Bobby is. I've asked him about other jobs before, and he keeps it quite vague. Like, yeah, at some point I'd love to move up and manage at another level. I think it's quite clear he wants this one, and he should absolutely be in consideration.
Yeah, that's fine that he be in consideration. I think for obvious reasons he would be, but there are hundreds of applicants for this job, guys, and people coming from far and wide with impressive resumes. I'm thinking about election campaigns, and I'm thinking Smyrniotis 2027 has a nice ring to it, because I think he could be the next Canada manager, and that would make a whole lot of sense. Someone that can build up that program at that time. Again, right now, go out and get the best manager you can with the biggest resume and the best kind of straightforward approach to going out and winning knockout round football games in the build over the next 2+ years. That's what you have to do. And then you bring in the Canadian who can build this program from top to bottom at that time. I mean, people need to be working behind the scenes in order to do some of that work right now, or like yesterday or a month or a year ago. It needs to be resourced a little bit better. But as of right now, I think that Smyrniotis, a person like him, his time will come. But for me, it's just not right now.
First match in charge for Mauro Biello, but they fell by 4-1 to the Samurai Blue. Did it change your opinion, Ollie? I think this is where I want to start. Did it change your opinion on Mauro Biello's potential candidacy as permanent head coach of this program, the way they played, the selection, whatever dynamic you want to take here based on the result and what happened in Japan?
I think it would be unfair to say it changed my opinion on Mauro Biello, because I think it was a very difficult game and a difficult situation to be thrust into. But it did, in some senses, clarify what I thought on what this team needs going forwards. And I think, unfortunately for Biello, that is more of a change than maybe an internal promotion is going to offer. Because for me, this team, there were some really bad moments in this game that we're seeing play through now from players who are much, much better than that. And to me, that suggested, I just didn't think that we saw a team that was really engaged, that looked up for this game. And that, to me, was a big surprise for a team that hasn't played for a few months, comes into the opportunity to play a really good team like Japan, to test yourself, get the kind of test that they've wanted more of over the past few years. And it was just flat. And that was the big disappointment coming out of this game for me, was like, I felt like I learned absolutely nothing that I didn't already know about this team. The midfield was still an issue. The defense is still questionable in terms of who are the right personnel, the right shape, and so on and so forth. What to do with Alphonso Davies is still a question. How you play, how you set up against top teams where their record over the past year has been pretty atrocious. Andy outlined it on One Nation yesterday. That's still a question. Like, I didn't feel like coming out of this game that they had taken any step forwards at all in terms of how they approach these games against top teams. To be frank, I don't feel like they're much closer to knowing how to do that than they were a year ago when we were watching the Uruguay game. And that, to me, is the big concern and the big disappointment of this window after September where you don't play. October, what did we really learn? Not much, in my opinion.
Gareth.
Yeah, to answer your specific question, well, that all depends on how you felt about Mauro Biello as Canada manager heading into this one. And although I rate Mauro, I think he's a good manager, and this game wasn't on him. He had these players who flew halfway or all the way around the world, had like 2 training sessions, and go out there and play a team that just smashed Germany 4-1 and Turkey 4-2 and caused both of their managers to be sacked. I mean, it's an unenviable position for any Canadian manager who, by the way, your players didn't get together to be able to work on things in the last window as well. That's the nature of international football. You need to be able to play. You need the opportunity to play, stick together, and grow as a unit. I've always advocated that I think that Canada would be best off going for the biggest, most established manager that they can afford and that they can find, and bring them to Canada over the course of the next 2.5-year window. And you're the man to get the most out of this group heading into a home World Cup. That's the way that I felt about things. And looking at the way the game played out, I think it goes well beyond Biello. I think him and his coaching staff, they tried to play it a little bit of the lower block. I think it did work at times, but it was individual errors that ended up costing this team in the end, arguably on all 4 of the goals. The 4th goal was great service by Japan, well created, but Canada gifted the 3 goals away in the first half. And they look at areas of stability, or rather instability, in this Canada squad. Ollie, said it. But I want to stress it. As much as there are discussions about the Canadian back line and what it should look like and need for required upgrades, that defense was done no favors whatsoever by the Canadian midfield in that game. The midfield was completely overrun and played off the park. And this isn't the first time. This was an area that required improvements under John Herdman. He played a 2-man midfield. We thought that putting a 3rd player in there might make a difference. It did not. They're just not up to the standard of some of the other players within their team and some of the players that they play against. That midfield, take away Eustachio, looks very, very thin. And Herdman, when he coached the team, he'd always discuss with me and always tell me there's different levels of players. It's hard to say that he's wrong in that assessment, not even within the Canadian team, but other players that could be available. The midfield needs to get a whole lot better. Whether that comes in terms of players not involved in the program right now, that might be the case. Maybe you have to convert some players in this current Canadian team and make the midfielders like Herdman tried to do with Bombito, because that midfield, if it continues on like this, is going to be a massive problem for whatever manager comes into play. You need more than one top midfielder to go on and beat the best teams in the world. And when Eustachio is not available, that probably becomes that much more apparent. So, look, a manager that has time, of a certain pedigree, can probably get the most of this team from a structural perspective. I still haven't changed my mind on that, but still some of the personnel and players that are available for the squad, that midfield, Adam, needs a lot of work to get up to standard.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find anyone in this room or in many rooms disagreeing with that assessment. But
that's why Jordan Morris was just such an important player that Herdman was going after. It's just, Aiden Morris, not Jordan Morris. You need.
He'd be nice.
It's just the big. It's just the biggest area of concern for me. I don't know if you guys watching it feel the same way, but
I do, and you're right. But what I would also say is that I think tactically, like they've got to find some better solutions to that. Like, and maybe it's about being more conservative at this point and not playing the front foot way that you want to play. Because like I look at a team like Australia, and it's easy to cherry pick individual teams, I know, but they played England at Wembley. They play with so much more structure than Canada do, with a team of players. Like, there's not one tier 1 player in that team who plays in the top 5 league. Like, some of these guys are like Japanese 2nd division or German 2nd division. Like, it's not a team that's enjoys a ton of talent on the roster. But the way they set up and the organization, the structure they play with is just on a different level than Canada. And I think you can get more out of maybe players who are a bit more limited in terms of their ability with the ball or whatever it is, if you give them that kind of organization and structure around them, which Canada are in short supply of right now.